Here today to demo the latest version of our Power Select Blender add-on, version 1.8. So to get the Power Select add-on, you can head over to blendersensei.com and follow the instructions there. Once you've got the zip file, you can go to Edit, Preferences, click Add-ons, press Install. I've got the Power Select add-on on my desktop here, so I click Desktop, and there it is. Press Install Add-on. Once it's installed, you can activate it by clicking the checkbox, and we are good to go. Real quickly, for anyone who's already familiar with this add-on and just you want to get straight to what the new features or bug fixes are, you can check out a link to the software update logs in the description of this video. Otherwise, you can just hang out and I'll be showing them off as we go along. Okay, so now that my PSA for add-ons is over, let's get into this. What is Power Select? So what Power Select is basically it adds a new selection method to Blender's default selection methods here that allows us to work more quickly and have to less often come over here and change our selection method. So I'll just go ahead and click on Power Select here. You'll see as soon as I do that the active tool options change. You can see this went from the select box stuff to the Power Select stuff. So the first real feature of Power Select is that it automatically combines tweak selection mode and select box mode. So if we click and drag over an object with Power Select active, we will automatically tweak, that is to move a thing, that's what tweak means. However, if the mouse is not over an object and we click and drag, a box selection will automatically occur. Another added bonus is that when we click on any member of our selection, all of the items will move when we drag our mouse. Nextly, we can double click items to enter edit mode and double click anywhere off of that item to exit edit mode to get back into object mode. So I'll double click this cube. I could then immediately perform a box selection, scale, do some things to this. But then I can click and tweak an individual vertex point, but also do a box selection. And thus far, we've only used the left mouse button, and that's it. No other hotkeys or anything. The double click on an object to edit it feature of Power Select is really cool with object types like text. So if we press Shift A and add a text, and I'll just align it a little bit better here. Maybe scale it up some. So if I want to edit the contents of this text, I can basically do it the same exact way I would rename any item in Blender somewhere else. Like in the outliner, you would double click on an object to rename it something else. And with Power Select, we can also just double click on a text and then start typing to change it. And then double click off to get back out, immediately move that around, immediately do a box selection, move our things, jump back into editing it, jump out, jump back into editing something else. And all of this we've done with just the left mouse button. Well, that's not entirely true. If you want to get real technical, we're also using the middle mouse button to navigate our view, but I think you basically get the point of what I'm saying here. All right, I'm going to double click out to get back into object mode, tap A and X to delete everything, Shift A, and add another default cube here. And I'm going to double click it to edit it, and then right click and press subdivide a few times. So we can double click on an object to edit it, double click anywhere off to get back into object mode. But if we double click on an object while in edit mode, we can select all flat surfaces of a mesh selection. Now in Power Select 1.8, this works no matter what mesh selection mode you're using. So I'll just tap 2 to go into edge selection. So we've got edges here. We can also hold Shift and add to that selection. Or if we say press 3 to go into face selection, we can simply double click anywhere here and select all linked flat faces basically. So this becomes a really useful tool when dealing with hard surface modeling and architectural stuff. Imagine I was clicking and dragging on here and I was making some kind of floor plan or something like that. and I press E to extrude, and say I do something else in here, E to extrude that. I can quickly double click things like this and be able to extrude something else, double click that, get a hold of that, and then select all the items in there, shift double click that, and then have that selected. And that's really useful. Power Select lets you get real granular with your workflow or your workflow for that week. Rather than having to cycle through by pressing W or coming over here and manually selecting a different selection method, Power Select will remember what mesh selection modes you want tweak on and you want it off. As you can see, as I press the default hotkeys 1, 2, and 3 to cycle through the different mesh selection modes here in Blender, you'll notice that this tweak button highlights and de-highlights, and this is where I have tweaks set to active on for both edges and vertex points, because typically if I'm clicking on an edge, I want to be able to manipulate it if I'm clicking and dragging on it, or same as a vertex point. However, in face selection mode, I almost always want clicking and dragging to be selecting, but you can set this up however you want. You could, disable it for vertex selection mode, and you'll immediately enter paint selection whenever you click and drag over vertex points. Of course, the same as in object mode, if you're not clicking over an object, automatically a box selection will occur. In addition to having individual tweak settings for each mesh selection type, Power Select will also automatically remember your tweak settings for different object types as well. So I'll double click to get out of that and say we add a curve here. Press G to grab, S to scale it up, double click it to edit it. Let's right click and subdivide it a few times. So notice that tweak is highlighted up here. This means that whenever I click on a handle or a point on the curve, I can tweak it. However, if I'm not clicking on any of that, a box selection will automatically happen without having to press any other hotkeys or do anything else. It just happens automatically. But of course, if we wanted the action of clicking and dragging the mouse over the curve to just automatically circle select, we could disable that, and that's what would happen when we clicked on the curve. Of course, if we click off the curve, box selection still happens. So that's a really awesome way to customize your workflow to exactly how you typically want things. But the point is, you'll change these settings much less often than you would need to switching back and forth between tweak, select box, and circle, or paint select as people sometimes call it, or drag select. This stuff gets handled a lot faster and more dynamically. Okay, so I'm going to double click to get back into object mode, and let's take a look at Power Select when using armatures. So I'll create an armature here, scale it up a bit. We can double click it to edit it. And as you can see, by default, we've got it set to tweak for this object type. We could extrude this out, and this tweaks as we put our mouse over and drag over it. Of course, if we are clicking off the object, a box selection will automatically occur. So that's real nice to be able to make those tweaks and still box select without having to press any additional hotkeys or change your selection method or anything like that. I'd like to reiterate again that minus navigation and pressing buttons to add objects and stuff, we've only used the left mouse button. That's basically been our entire workhorse this entire time, which is great. So I'm going to box select over these items, press X to delete those, double click this weird little thing that we made so we can go into edit it. So now I want to talk about the transparency select feature of Power Select. So typically, if you want to make a selection that includes everything behind the object you're selecting, you'll need to enable transparency either through that or wireframe mode or some other method in Blender. And then you would want to make your selection and then disable that. But Power Select has a really awesome feature where we can just hold Alt, and as we begin to click and drag, the object will automatically become transparent. Then we can let go and we are back to our regular solid view. We can also hold Alt and Shift before we begin to drag, and this will actually add to that selection as well. So that's extremely useful right there. We could hit 3 to go over to face selection, and then I could delete these faces. So if you say you wanted to do something like that. So Power Select not only works in the 3D view, it also works in the UV editor. So I'm going to split this 3D view screen here and switch this over to the UV editor here. Then I'm going to double click off here and delete this, and let's add a monkey head. So if we double click on the monkey head, we can see the pre-existing UV map for this Suzanne head. And I'm going to go ahead and click this button here, which will pin all the UVs. Basically make sure that the UVs still stay on the screen even if we don't have anything selected. We can immediately circle select when clicking over a UV island, but just like in object mode and edit mode in the 3D view, if we're not clicking on a UV, we'll automatically do a box selection. And just like we can double click similar surfaced angles in the 3D view, we can also double click in the UV editor to select entire islands, and that's a really fast way to select each UV item. Box selection there, and then of course circle selecting when we're clicking on things, and double click, and those items together make things work really fast. So that's pretty great, and we'll go ahead and close that up. All right, so let's take a look at some of Power Select's options. And so if I click this, we have a menu for basic settings, and then we have a tweak settings. So there's quite a few options here, but it's kind of ironic because I don't like options. That is, I don't like having a lot of things to remember, a lot of things to do, a lot of like stuff to fool with all the time. The point of there being a lot of options in this scenario is that you're able to adjust things exactly as you want once or very seldomly, and then never have to fool with it, and just then have those things automatically taken care of as you're working. All right, so let's take a look at these. So first we have always on. And so what this does is it ensures that whenever you double click to edit an object, that the selection method will be automatically set to Power Select in that edit mode rather than whatever last selection mode you happen to have it on. You see, because Blender stores individual selection methods for each object edit mode. And so what that can mean is that, say you had like, I don't know, select lasso or something on while you were editing a curve. If we were to go back into object mode, Shift A, curve, Bezier, add a curve here. Say whenever you are editing a curve, you had it last on select lasso. If the selection method isn't on Power Select, then we can't double click to get out of edit mode. And that can be a little disorienting because sometimes you're not always paying attention to this, and you don't want to have to manually change this to Power Select when you get into that edit mode. So this just ensures everything works smoothly and you're able to quickly maneuver around and get things done. Auto enable cage edit. This is a pretty cool feature. If we say add a cube and add a subdivision surface modifier, we'll crank that up a little bit and maybe shade it smooth here. So with this option active, what this will do is it will always make sure that this button right here, cage editing, gets activated whenever we double click to edit an object. If I just press tab, the default edit mode button, you'll see that the cage does not basically shrink wrap to the object, but whenever I double click, it does, and this will always happen. And this is just a kind of smoother, nicer way to work. Of course, there are times when you want to disable this, but typically I love having this on by default. It makes things look nice, and it's just a nice way to work. Industry compatible is a new feature in Power Select 1.8. And so basically, if you're using Blender's industry compatible key map like this, you would want to make sure that that option is active. And this prevents the transparency select and other features of Power Select from getting in the way of navigating. For alt navigation users, The one caveat with this is if you want to do a transparency select, you need to hold Alt and Shift, and then you can still do that even if you are a Alt navigation user, as opposed to just holding Alt if you have that option enabled. And then the tweak settings, of course, we mentioned earlier. These automatically display depending on what mode you're in, so you can set those on the fly. But if you want to set those all up all at once ahead of time for whatever workflow suits your needs, you're good to go. And that's about it. Thanks very much for watching. Please subscribe to this channel. Like this video if you think it was cool, and go check out Power Select